My sister jumped off a building on my wedding day, and her last words were to marry my husband. And everyone wishes I would die so that my sister can come back. I was born stupid. He kowtowed and climbed 3,000 steps just to pray for his cousin to be resurrected. Finally, the Buddha appeared. They got what they wanted, but they all came back to me. But I don't remember who they are at all.
1.
Today is my wedding and also my sister's death anniversary. The cold wind in the temple made people feel stiff all over. I was wearing a bright red wedding dress. My knees were so painful that I couldn't bend them, and my forehead was bleeding. The enlightened monk only said Amitabha. His compassionate eyes showed some sympathy. Are you sure? Are you sure you want to pay the price and slowly forget the most important person in order to get your sister back? I timidly held my bleeding hand in my pocket, and when I looked up, I was blinded by the snow. 3 hours ago, in front of all the guests, the elder sister jumped off a 100-meter-high building and said in a mournful voice, "Song Lang, I will marry you." The general brother who was betrothed to me turned around and ran towards the falling body as he was called upon to worship each other. As the crowd gathered, I was roughly dragged in front of Sister A, and my palms were instantly rubbed raw by the bluestone slabs. She leaned over to my ear, chuckled, and said the last sentence. "I have finally taken away all your luck and made you hated by everyone." What is hated by everyone? Awan doesn't understand. But my sister has been bleeding. It must be very painful. I cried out in pain and wanted to wipe off her blood, like my mother did. I should have hugged her and comforted her, but it was a pity that I didn't bring any candy with me to give her. When I wanted to touch my sister, the general brother pushed me away with disgust on his face. If you hadn't drugged me, marrying me would have been a good idea. Song Hanyi and I were betrothed to each other. Fruits were thrown into the carriage, but she only accepted my crooked embroidered purse. Until my elder sister, who had been lost for many years, was brought back by my parents. My parents felt sorry for her, so they changed the engagement without caring about my reputation. Later he was drugged, and I was called to the backyard. When I was panicking and trying to find someone to save him, everyone came over. I clearly didn't do anything, but he still resents me until now. The top scholar I saved pulled my arm and let me fall into the muddy snow, looking at me coldly. "You are so cunning and scheming." Gu Peiji, the top scholar whom I raised. When he was 8 years old, his biological parents used him to pay off a debt to a powerful person, and he almost died in a tiger cage. It was me who saved him from the wounds. I asked Gu Peiji to be my tutor. Later, he won the top 3 places in the imperial examinations and was highly valued by the court. Until my sister comes back. He noticed that I always bullied my elder sister out of jealousy, and his attitude towards me became nothing but ridicule and defensiveness. Time and again, he stood in front of me to help others, even at the cost of speculating about me with the greatest malice. My brother, who grew up with me, also scolded me with red eyes. "Why can't you be the one to die?" Lin Zian used to take me out to play often, and he was the most pleasant young man in the capital. He took me to ride horses in the streets and to roam in the wilderness. He said, "Brother wants to take Wan Wan to be the freest girl in the capital." After my sister came back, he became more distant. She tells everyone that I am not as good as my elder sister at all, and that I am always trying to hurt others. But what does this have to do with me? I only bowed twice to the general brother on my wedding day and secretly ate half a piece of osmanthus cake. The accusations and crying around me mixed together, and I became panicked for no reason. Did I do something wrong again and make people unhappy? Others say that Awan is stupid, but Awan is actually not stupid at all. I heard about the temple spirits here, so I braved the coldest days of winter to pray to the gods and Buddha to bring my sister back. The only people Awan can pray to are gods and Buddhas. I nodded firmly. Sure. Then let sister come back. Even if the price is that I gradually forget them.
I'm really not smart.
Many people like Ajay, and I feel happy when I see her sly smile. They will be sad for a long time without her. No matter how much I try to coax him, it doesn't work. The monk finally sighed softly. Okay. As I staggered down the mountain, I saw a man standing in the snow. Gu Peiji seemed relieved to see me, and then sneered. Do you think I won't be able to find you if you hide here? Now he's disappearing on purpose again. Who are you trying to show off to? He was the top scholar whom I raised. I didn't expect that the first person I forgot would be him.
2.
Amid the wind and snow, my mind went blank. I felt like he was familiar to me, but my head hurt from thinking about him so much that I couldn't remember anything. I was confused for a moment and asked timidly, "Who are you?" I searched my memory for a long time, but I couldn't remember what the relationship between him and me was. Maybe he was a bad guy waiting to take me for money, or maybe he was a bandit who wanted to kill me. In short, my body's subconscious reaction made me realize clearly that he was not a good person. Awan couldn't get close to him. My brother said that if you don't like someone, you should stay away from them. Otherwise, you'll be unlucky. In Gu Peiji's impression, although I am stupid, I can remember things. This has never happened before. Gu Peiji was stunned for a moment and continued to taunt. Don't think that you can erase all the evil things you did to the second young miss by pretending not to know her. You are not as good as her at all. You used to be well-behaved and sensible, but now you can pretend to be innocent and kill people. I was unaware of it, and immediately chose the escape route and moved quietly. Gu Peiji seemed to notice something was wrong with me, but he didn't take it seriously and continued to mock me. What tricks are you trying to play? How are you planning to frame others? You have been targeting the second miss from the beginning to the end. Every time, she generously forgives you and then secretly cries behind your back. You! His voice stopped abruptly. Just because I was in his sight, I didn't hesitate and jumped out from his side like a rabbit. He paused for a moment, and a strand of his hair was blown up by the wind. He subconsciously wanted to reach out and grab me, but he only grabbed the corner of my clothes that slipped away. The next second, I stepped on the hanging snow behind him. The mountain road blurred before my eyes, and the howling wind and snow were like knives, scratching my ears and making them hurt. Countless rocks scratched my arms, ankles, and cheeks. I couldn't help but close my eyes in fear. But I couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of relief in my heart. Ever since my elder sister came back, my parents, who doted on me, began to look down on me and say that I was immature and drove me to a dilapidated side room. My brother no longer asked me to go out and play, often rolled his eyes at me, and then let others laugh at me for being stupid and dull. Even my brother the general, who always liked me, no longer stood on my side, saying that I looked innocent, but was actually vicious. But no one told me what Awan did wrong. Did Awan eat a few more biscuits? Or did you secretly not finish reading those 2 poems? I must be too playful. I was playing with the cat a few days ago, and fell asleep under the eaves. The teacher hit me on the head, and must have gone to complain to them. The next moment, I rolled into a broad embrace. The sound of the wind around immediately became much quieter. Gu Pei then growled in fear. Can't you be like the second miss and let others have less worries? 3. Finally, we landed on a tree trunk on the hillside. Gu Peiji groaned softly and held me tighter with his arms. The only sound in my ears was his pounding heartbeat. This kind of stability makes me feel uneasy for no reason.
Run. Run.
Awan will be hurt if she stays with this person. My body almost subconsciously resisted, and I struggled wildly in his arms. The already precarious tree trunk began to shake violently, and the snow on the pine tree fell to the bottom of the slope. While struggling, I saw Gu Peiji's astonished eyes. The corners of his eyes gradually turned red with moisture. Awan. No wonder he was so surprised. Gu Peiji was so self-conscious and sensitive when he was young that he even hurt himself. The teacher taught me to be tolerant to others and to be a good and kind girl. So, every time he lost control, I would gently hug his curled-up body. Then she stroked his back with her little hands again and again, coaxing him earnestly. Don't be afraid, Peiji. I'm here, and no one can hurt you. You deserve to be loved. Look, I will always treat you well. He always calmed down slowly, and in the silence his eyes looked at me intently, his eyes flashing constantly. From childhood to adulthood, I will never be stingy with anything I can give to him. So in his eyes, I have always trusted him and would never resist like this. But now I am still struggling in fear in his arms. The tree trunk creaked, already unable to bear the weight. Gu Peiji's breathing became more and more rapid, and finally, he took a deep breath. He softened his tone and coaxed me, as if testing me. "Don't be afraid, Juan. I will protect you. If you move again, we will all fall. You listen to me the most, right?" Just like when I coaxed him in the past, there was still some expectation hidden under his pretended calm eyes. And I bit his shoulder. I whimpered in warning, like a little wolf, with all my might, and soon blood began to seep through the material of his clothing. His body trembled violently. Gu Peiji ignored the pain and immediately grabbed my lower back, almost pulling me into his arms. He bowed his head, buried his head in my neck, and whispered absent-mindedly, "Can you please stop making such a fuss? You're still pretending, and it's really scaring me."
4.
A few hours later, we were discovered by the servants who were accompanying us and were rescued. He took me into the carriage. The carriage was filled with warm fragrance, isolating the cold outside. I pressed my back against the wall of the carriage, trying to keep as much distance as possible from him. Gu Peiji sat silently on the other side. When he looked at me, a trace of pain flashed in his deep eyes. Only then did I notice that there were bloodstains on the back of his clothes, and blood was still oozing out. He forced a bitter smile, took out the ointment, and covered my hand without saying a word. I bit it again in fear, and the smell of blood rushed into my nostrils. Gu Peiji frowned in pain, but still did not let go. His eyes reddened uncontrollably. "Don't pretend. I will take you back to the Lin family to give justice to the second Mississippi." I still didn't let go, but bit it even tighter. He swallowed the bitterness in his tone, slowly rubbed the ointment on my wound with his fingertips, lowered his eyes, and smiled bitterly. "Do you still remember the young master and General Song?" After a while, I realized that he didn't want to hurt me, so I wasn't as hostile as before. But deep down, I couldn't help but want to stay away from him. When I heard him mention my brother and the general, my eyes flashed, and I remained silent with caution. He seemed to see through it. His fingers trembled, and he looked up and stared at me deeply. Am I the only one who forgot? At one point, I saw sadness on his face. "I don't understand. What's there to be sad about? He and I obviously don't know each other. I think he is more delicate than me." After he applied the medicine, I quickly took my hand back and held it to my chest. Gu Peiji's breathing stagnated, his hands under his sleeves kept shaking, and tears gradually appeared in his eyes. I guess he lost his beloved sachet handkerchief and was crying and asking someone to come over and comfort him. I ignored him and continued to sit far away. During the long silence, I began to feel an uncontrollable anticipation in my heart. Just wait until sister comes back. I'm a little nervous again. My brother must be worried about me since I haven't been back for so long. He used to dote on me the most and said that Awan was the most well-behaved and lovely girl in the whole capital. Every time I followed him proudly and was happy to be his follower. He always rubs my head with a proud look on his face. "Awan, from now on, I will protect you. No one can say anything bad about you. I will be the first one to stand up for you." I don't know how long it had been, but suddenly an excited roar was heard outside the carriage, coming from far away and getting closer. Lin Xian's voice was a little hoarse because of anger. "How dare Lin Wan come back? I will never recognize her as my sister again in this life. You deserve to die outside. Maybe you can come back after you die. General Song is crazy and wants to kill her now. When Lin Wanjin comes back, I will personally tie her up to avoid implicating the Lin family." I was stunned for a moment, then I lowered my head and clenched my hands on my knees, and my vision was blurry. Burning tears fell on the back of his hands, and the pain from the wounds from kneeling began to build again. At this moment, the carriage stopped, and someone was filled with thunderous rage. "Is she back?"
5.
Before I could get off, Lin Xian pulled me out of the carriage. My injured knees hit the edge, my face turned pale in pain, and I almost fell to the ground. "Have you had enough of this?" Lin Xian roared in anger. "Lin Wan, after you pretended to be stupid and framed someone, do you think it's fun to put on such a pitiful look?" I lowered my head in panic, trying to take out the jade token he had given me. "Awan doesn't know right from wrong. Whenever he makes someone unhappy, he will use his most precious thing to appease them. Lin Zian raised his eyebrows and pressed my head, smiling. Brother will give you a jade token of forgiveness. No matter what you did, as long as you take it out, brother will forgive you. Guaranteed to work every time.
Pa.
Jade chips flew everywhere before my eyes and broke into pieces. Lin Zian didn't even look at the useful jade token of exoneration and impatiently threw it to the ground with his own hands. His eyes were filled with disgust. You're pretending to be innocent again. Not only did you harm Ear this time, you even dared to run away in public. Do you really think that I will be soft-hearted towards you just because you hold a broken jade token? No, not at all. I curled my fingers in midair, pursed my lips tightly, and with tears in my eyes, I anxiously tried to pick up the broken jade. But when he bent down, Lin Zian suddenly pulled him by the arm and led him into the yard. He stepped on the debris with a cold look in his eyes. Lin Wan, as your elder brother, I have been too indulgent to you. If you continue like this, you will become lawless and domineering sooner or later. I staggered and could only barely keep up with him. Finally, without warning, he stopped. I bumped into his back suddenly. My nose tip felt sore and painful, and I looked up at him blankly. Lin Zian turned sideways. So, today I must teach you a lesson. Awan didn't know what was right or wrong, but she also knew. I wasn't the one who pushed my sister down. Awan was not wrong. My eyes were red, and I looked at him firmly. Everyone is telling me I'm wrong. Awan no. Awan doesn't admit it. The palm wind was whistling, and when I was slapped to the ground by Lin Zian, my ears were buzzing and blood was oozing from the corners of my mouth. Look into his stunned and slowly gloomy eyes. I'm not so determined anymore. Like a little animal, I gently put my hands into my sleeves, slowly curled up into a ball, buried my head, and didn't dare to look at him again. Because of fear, my whole body was shaking uncontrollably. Suddenly, someone roared, "Where is that evil girl?" 6. Before my father arrived, my mother had already held me in her arms. Her miserable, crying face suddenly enlarged in front of me. I was afraid that she would worry, so I was about to say that I was fine. She screamed in a trance. "Where's Ear? Why didn't Ear come back with you? She loves to play tricks. She just got separated from you, right? Speak up. Why aren't you talking? Is your brain broken? Are you dumb too?" My mother clutched my shoulders and cried heartbreakingly. I gritted my teeth and slowly wiped the blood off my hands on my clothes. Then I held her face with my worn hands and wiped away her tears. Just like she used to do before, she gently coaxed me. "Don't cry, mother. My sister will come back. I made a wish, and the Buddha said it will come true. 3,000 steps. Every step has my blood on my forehead. I think Buddha will never lie." Looking at my mother's resentful eyes, my face itched, but I raised my hand to wipe away the tears. She suddenly stood up, grabbed my shoulders tightly, and screamed, "You're lying. Ear was killed by a fool like you. You evildoer. Why aren't you the one who died? It's you. It's all because of you. My Ear will never come back." His expression changed in an instant, as if he was crazy. Before I could panic and say Mom and Awan, Lin Zian grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and dragged me behind him. Only Dad was left holding Mom in his arms and snuggling with each other. They actually looked 10 years older in an instant. Lin Zian looked at me with extreme disappointment. "Disobeying your parents and framing Dachin Wanwan. What other bad things are you going to do?" It was snowing again, and the rustling sound pressed down on my shoulders as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. I saw my brother's handsome yet unfamiliar eyes and features, and then looked at my parents, who were staring at me with hatred. Slowly, he dropped his shoulders. "Brother, I was wrong. I will take the blame." 7. When I was tied up and kneeling in the ancestral hall, a man I didn't know was standing next to me. Gu Peiji pointed at me and frowned. Even if she was handed over to Song Hanyi, he wouldn't tie her up like this, right? Lin Zian said nothing, but looked at me with pity in his eyes. But the next second, he seemed to have thought of something, clenched the dagger, and immediately became firm. He moved closer to me step by step. My parents stood in the dark, their eyes filled with eagerness and anticipation. I was happy in my heart too, but my silly smile froze on my lips in an instant. The sharp blade stabbed into my chest, and Lin Zian's hands were shaking. Because of lack of experience, the dagger only went in half an inch and was still stirring in the flesh. The pain made me hunch over and breathe carefully. I looked at my brother in surprise, my lips moving, but I couldn't utter a word for a long time. "Brother?" He coaxed her in a trembling voice. "Don't be afraid, Juan. It won't hurt in a while." Lin Zian gritted his teeth and was about to thrust forward again when he was suddenly punched by someone and fell to the ground. And I fell into a broad embrace. Gu Peiji's face was filled with fear, and he looked at Lin Zian with anger. "Lin Zian, what are you doing? She is your biological sister. You almost killed her just now." Lin Zian looked at his bloody hands in a daze, threw away the dagger still covered with blood and flesh in fear, and slowly returned to normal. "Gu Peiji, you need to know your identity. She is my sister. Even if you pass the imperial examination and become the top scholar, you are just a slave she picked up." He became gentle, smiled, and coaxed me. "Awan, come to your brother." I covered the bleeding wound and didn't move. Gu Peiji stood in front of me, his face completely darkened. "Do you still want to kill her? She once foolishly ran all over the capital just because you said you liked to eat osmanthus cake. So what? The Taoist priest said that only by killing her can Ir be brought back. She was the one who killed someone. Why shouldn't she pay for Ir's life?" Lin Zian suddenly raised his voice with a sad roar. "Don't forget that Ir once spent the whole night looking for books and painting for you so that you could meet the master. Don't be fooled by Lin Wan's pretense and innocent appearance. Don't you want Ir to come back?" Upon hearing this, Gu Peiji's face turned pale, his body shook violently in the air, and his attitude relaxed a little. Just when Lin Zian breathed a sigh of relief and wanted to step forward to take me away. "I think." Gu Peiji looked up, his face grim as he protected me even tighter, and said calmly, "But Awan and I have been together for more than 10 years. Even if she did something wrong in the past, I would teach her to correct it in the future. She is gone, but this has nothing to do with Awan." Lin Zian was stunned for a moment, then sneered. "There is no absolute relationship. Why are you pretending to be a good person? It was you who attacked Lin Wan in person, saying that she was not worthy of being Ir's biological sister, and you volunteered to brave the wind and snow to bring Wanwan back to Kaodao and confess your guilt." Gu Peiji's face became even uglier, and he wanted to take me away without saying a word. But I didn't move. Gu Peiji grabbed my wrist and looked back in surprise. Everyone was looking at me, but I was only staring at Lin Zian. "Brother wants to kill me." I held back my tears, feeling lost and aggrieved. "Brother wants to kill me. Everyone is discussing whether I should do it and whether it is worth it." But what Awan could understand was that my brother, who once doted on me so much, took a dagger and stabbed it into my chest with his own hands. You could hear a pin drop around you, but I was the only one crying and making a scene like an ignorant person. All I could do was stand here and look at my brother, my voice choked with sobs and my mouth breaking.
8.
The Lin family is so bold. Are they trying to hide this person away and protect him? He paused. When Song Hanyi arrived, I had already fainted from the pain, and it was a basin of ice water that woke me up. When I opened my eyes, I met Song Hanyi's indifferent eyes. He looked away and turned to look at Lin Zian coldly. Or does Mr. Lin want to kill and silence the witnesses to help Lin Wan escape the blame? He is the general appointed by the current emperor to protect the country. He has 50,000 soldiers under his command, so naturally he is powerful and influential. The entire Lin mansion was silent. He suddenly leaned over, lifted my chin and sneered, and every word he said was chilling to the bone. "Do you think I'll let you die? Nothing is so easy in this world. You haven't even atoned for Ir yet. Song Hanyi came here not to save me, but to torture me better." I looked into his gloomy eyes, which were different from his usual gentle ones. Not as anyone expected, I would be so scared that I would break down and cry. I was just stunned for a moment, picked up the dagger stained with my blood, and handed it to him. I must have done something really wrong. My brother punished me, my parents punished me, but they couldn't tell me what I did wrong after the punishment. Everyone told me I was wrong. Was it me who broke into the backyard and wanted to call for help for Brother Song, but was pushed away by his burning eyes? Or was it me who failed to notice my elder sister's thoughts in time and gave up my seat on the wedding day, which led to her jumping off the building in public and blaming me so much? I don't understand. All I know is that from then on, everyone avoided me and called me a scheming lunatic. But Awan is not crazy, just a little stupid. He can't tell right from wrong and can't distinguish good from evil. Awan didn't want to be a stupid child. She envied the smartest girl in the capital. But people are just spectators, commenting on everything without permission, and Awan is always wrong. Song Hanyi's body stiffened. The next second, he slapped the dagger away viciously. As the iron items fell to the ground with a clang, he pulled me up roughly and walked out. No one dared to disobey. Perhaps realizing that this was a farewell to me, Lin Zian suddenly called out Wan Wan in sorrow. I was stunned and thought for a long time.
Who is that?
I really can't remember. Song Hanyi tied me to the carriage, and when we arrived, he pulled me by the rope and rushed me through the general's mansion, which was filled with white silk. That is my sister's tablet. She is rightfully his legal wife. He gritted his teeth and pressed my head, knocking it in front of her coffin again and again. Blood flowed down my forehead again. I was in so much pain that I became numb. Finally, he grabbed my collar and roared in despair. Where on earth did you get your mind, you vicious woman? 9. My sister's body is missing. Is it true that my sister will never come back? It turns out that Buddha can also lie. Song Hanyi forced me to the ground, and I kowtowed countless times. Wan Wan, you stop pretending. You've only kowtowed a few times.
Wan Wan.
Wan Wan, Wan Wan, don't sleep. Wake up. This trick won't work on me. There was a hint of panic in his last tone. My body felt lighter, and he picked me up. I dreamed of the past in a trance. It turned out that Song Hanyi was not a general with great achievements. He was just the old general's illegitimate son, but the eldest son. His Majesty arranged my marriage, but he never expected that I would have a child like him. When Song Hanyi came back, everyone laughed at him and mocked him for being a bastard and wanting to marry a fool. But it was a clear day, and I stood beside him, throwing stones back at those people one by one. The teacher said that Awan should be a kind-hearted lady. I was probably also beaten black and blue, so I squatted down and handed him the few remaining candies. But he was cold and not likable at all. Song Hanyi's head was covered in blood. He raised his eyelids in boredom and frowned. Get lost. I took back the candy and left angrily, feeling it was not worth it. He deserves to be beaten. Later, at a palace banquet, a group of people casually stripped him of his shirt and threw him into the snowstorm. Song Hanyi was covered in wounds and was crawling on the ground in a panic, unable to even get up. It was snowing so heavily outside, and he was so embarrassed. If no one cares about him, Song Hanyi will freeze to death here sooner or later. I think I should save him. The master taught me to have a kind heart, not to mention that he is my little husband. Even if Song Hanyi doesn't like me. It was a land of ice and snow, and all you could see was the blinding white and the bone-chilling cold. In the warm room where all the dignitaries were watching the fun, there was only one small figure who rushed out without fear of the wind and snow. I took off my cloak and put it on him. Song Hanyi was stunned. Then he looked up at me slowly, his eyes red as he said, "I'm dirty." I brushed away the frost on his brows and looked blankly at his snow-stained body. Do you want to wash it then? There is a hot spring in the Lin mansion. If you are willing to come, I can help you. Under the vast expanse of ice and snow, only the little fool whom he had once despised said sincerely, "I'll take care of it for you." Song Hanyi didn't say anything. The snow fell on his slightly trembling eyelashes. He looked at me for a long time. Finally, he suddenly laughed. When he looked at me again, the thick layer of ice in his eyes seemed to melt into a pool of spring water in an instant. He sighed, "You really are a fool." Later, he led his troops to war, and before leaving he asked me to wait for him to come back. When the soldiers returned with victory, The whole city is filled with red sleeves fluttering. But Hanyi only accepted the purse that I embroidered crookedly.
I should concentrate more.
You can see the smiling woman beside him, who is well protected. She is my sister, who was found. Later on, I learned that it was my sister who had been treating his wounds and illnesses on the battlefield. He had already been attracted to her. In order to make up to my elder sister, my parents coaxed me into arranging this marriage for her. When everyone thought that I was deeply in love with Hanyi and cried and made a fuss, I felt relieved. That's great, the little husband is going to be someone else's little husband. I no longer have to follow him around and pretend to support him in front of outsiders. From then on, I obediently avoided suspicion and never looked for Hanyi again. But why did he drag me under him and torment me like that all night long? Is the drug's effect really so strong that even a battle-hardened general can't control himself? I do not understand. The world is unpredictable and people's hearts are filthy. Only a one was stupid and couldn't figure it out.
10.
In a drowsy state, all the painful and happy memories about Hanyi seemed to be gently erased by a pair of big hands. No trace left. When I opened my eyes again, I stared at the court doctor. When he turned around, he saw Hanyi standing behind the doctor with a gloomy face. In the setting winter sun, he was really unpleasant and blocked out the light in the whole room. Finally, the setting sun shone on his cold eyes and brows, and such a handsome man stood there. After a long time, I looked up blankly and asked hesitantly, "Who are you?" The third person I forgot was Hanyi. He was stunned for a moment, then looked at me with disgust. "What are you playing at?" Impatience, compassion, depression, disgust, these emotions were mixed in his eyes. He is not a good person. Alarm bells rang in my heart, and I curled up backwards frantically. It's a completely defensive attitude toward strangers. "Are you hiding from me?" Hanyi frowned tightly, his face full of disbelief. In his eyes, I have always been the little fool who follows him obediently and never despises his identity. She can stand up for him without hesitation and can also use her small body to protect him behind her. The only thing is that he won't be as cautious as a grinning little beast. Hanyi's expression became more and more ugly. He sneered, clamped my wrist forcibly, and pulled me in front of him. "Do you think that by pretending not to know me, you can write off the drugging you gave me and forcing me to marry you? I want to see what kind of drama can be performed. If I hadn't forgotten it, I would be stunned. Because the first thing he talked about was not my sister but the ugly thing that made me have to marry him. Seems to be a reminder. I didn't. I don't know you. Go away. Stay away from me. Mother. Father.
Help.
Awan doesn't like you. Awan hates you. Go away." I was shaking all over and crying but couldn't get free. The next second, I almost killed him by biting hard on his forearm. A muffled groan of pain and a suppressed gasp came from above my head. His hands clenched even tighter. Pain. Awan is in pain. I bit deeper through tearful eyes, my nose wrinkled, and a warning growled low in my throat. Suddenly, hot, sweet blood flowed into my mouth. I don't know if it was my illusion, but Hanyi's eyes gradually turned red and his voice trembled so much that it was almost inaudible. "Since you insist on being so angry with me, then I'll oblige you. I can pretend for a while, but can I pretend for a lifetime? From now on, I want you to stay by my side and atone for Ear's sins every day. Even if you don't remember, I will make you remember everything one by one. You can never forget me even if you die." Almost at the same time, a voice of ecstasy suddenly came from outside. "General. Second Miss. Second Miss is not dead. Miss Lin Air, you're back." 11. While he was distracted, I suddenly pulled out my arm and quickly retreated to the corner farthest away from him. Seeing this, Hanyi's smile became more self-deprecating. Then, without hesitation, he turned away and asked someone to lock me up. I stayed in the room, lowered my head and buried it in my knees, curled up in the corner quietly and motionlessly. I curled the corners of my lips stupidly. That's great. The Buddha's blessing brought my sister back. Everybody will be happy, and we can live our lives as before. The sun sets, leaving only darkness. Daddy and Mommy, please find Awan soon. Awan is so scared. The front hall was bustling with activity, and faint cries of grievance could be heard. Mother, father, I thought I was going to die, but when my personal maid was offering sacrifices to me, she found that I was still alive and rescued me. My daughter didn't wake up until today. I am unfilial and have made you worry.
Ear. My ear.
Mother suddenly burst into tears. Perhaps they had already snuggled together and comforted each other. But my sister is clearly back, so why doesn't anyone mention me? I buried my head deeper. Maybe I was hallucinating and heard it wrong. Maybe it was too late, or maybe one was discovered skipping classes and was punishing me on purpose. I heard my sister calling people over and over again, including Brother Gu, Brother Song, and Brother Lin. Finally, she choked up and asked, "Where's my sister?" She must be worried, right? Everyone was silent. I unexpectedly heard her voice. "System, you asked me to make Lin Wan hated by everyone and then escape. Why did you issue a task for me to come back and continue living with these people? But it doesn't matter. Anyway, you used props to integrate me into their memories and directly deprived the group's favorite heroine of her luck. It was too easy. Since my silly sister is a White Lotus, I will expose her true face with my own hands. Then I will drag her into the mud and torture her until she collapses and despairs, and see if she is still as pure and kind as before."
12.
Wan, sister misses you so much. It's all my fault. I have made you suffer. Sister hugged me and cried. At the same time, her interesting voice rang in my ears. I have already thought of how to kill her. Lin Zian looked at my dazed expression and frowned in dissatisfaction. Ear died because of you, and you haven't taken it seriously yet. Why don't you just admit your mistake and apologize? That's enough. I looked up hesitantly, and just when I was about to ask who he was, Gu Peiji stood in front of me. He touched the wound on my forehead with a look of heartache, his voice trembling, and turned around and shouted angrily. "Lin Zian, she is also your biological sister. Are you done yet? Wanwan has been tormented enough today. If we want to say sorry, which one of us can be worthy of her?" Because of the interruption, Lin Zian didn't have time to realize that something was wrong with me. He looked at me coldly, stood up, and carefully helped Lenny away. Just when Gu Peiji wanted to take me away, Song Hanyi suddenly grabbed my wrist. He said in a hoarse voice, "She wants to stay." When I thought about what had just happened, I immediately struggled in fear. Wan. Song Hanyi's face became darker and darker, and his tone actually revealed pleading. Gu Peiji slammed his hand down, took a step forward, and moved sideways to protect me behind him. "Song Hanyi, since you like ear so much, just go after her and stop harming Wanwan. The whole capital knows that you abandoned your newlywed wife on your wedding day and clung to someone else's corpse. What kind of situation did you put Wanwan in?" Song Hanyi growled. Gu Peiji. Gu Peiji ignored him and became even more excited, as if the jealousy that had been pent up for a long time had finally been ignited. "Song Hanyi, if it weren't for Wanwan at the pavilion on that snowy night, you would have died. But Wan caught a cold and almost died at home. In order to prevent you from being bullied, she stayed by your side every day, just to support you. Every time she was worried that you would be treated harshly in the mansion, she happily brought you food. Do you think you have the opportunity to march and fight because the emperor suddenly discovered your talent? Don't dream." Wanwan knelt down and begged her father all night long just to make your wish come true and no longer rely on her protection in the future. But it was obviously me who showed up first, and I was the one who grew up with her. But she kept looking at you just because of that damn engagement. I thought you could treat her better than I did, but look what you did. Io used her power to force you to marry her. You were not powerful at that time, so you could only drug yourself to ruin Wanwan's innocence and let her be with you. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I'm afraid you would have kept it a secret from everyone. Song Hanyi, you took advantage of her and made her suffer." With every word Gu Peiji said, Song Hanyi's face turned paler. In the end, his body shook violently in the air several times, and he was almost unable to stand. He was like an abandoned, wounded animal, and called me Wanwan again in near despair. I hid behind Gupeji and was frightened by the sound again. But I can't remember Song Hanyi, nor do I remember Gupeji. The past has nothing to do with me anymore. I was just instinctively afraid. When I got on the carriage, Gupeji wanted to wipe the blood off for me. But I immediately became alert and dodged. His eyes suddenly turned red and wet, and I tilted my head to look at him in confusion. What's there to cry about? Did he lose something again? I think if Wanwan doesn't like him, she will definitely not help him get him back. 13. I was brought back to the Lin mansion, but I couldn't find the white rabbit that had always been with me. That was the rabbit I picked up after my sister came back. It is just like me, stupid and not liked by others. At that time, everyone accused me of being scheming. I can only fall asleep holding this rabbit. It is the only companion that does not despise me and the only one that stays with me. Others don't want it, but Awan does. But when I followed the traces and peeled away the grass in the backyard, all I saw was a dead body lying in a pool of blood. It must have died in great pain, with blood oozing from the corners of its mouth, and even the bones in its spine broken. I was stunned for a moment, then squatted down, held it in my arms, and called it softly. I wondered why it didn't open its eyes for such a long time. I touched its soft fur. The white rabbit's body was stiff and stained with blood. It usually likes to stay close to me quietly without making any noise and rest its head on my arm. It is clearly so well behaved. Curl up, live slowly, and no one will bother you. The sister's inner voice was clear to the ear. I just said that the rabbit was an eyesore, and Lin Zian killed it himself. I can't wait to see Lin Wan coming over. Seeing the rabbit being killed and thrown away by his own brother, he must be very upset. I looked up blankly. The elder sister was in the hall not far away, smiling and looking up, saying something, as if she was acting coquettishly. Lin Zian wiped the blood from his fingertips with a handkerchief, rubbed her head, and sighed helplessly. You are usually too willful. Never mind, I will help you get rid of the things that are in your eyesore from now on. His tone showed that he didn't care whether the silly rabbit lived or died. That stupid rabbit nearly cost me my life. Crack. I took a step back and broke a branch. Everyone looked at me in astonishment. Lin Zian frowned and turned around. The look I gave my brother was different from the past. It was completely unfamiliar and terrified. Perhaps he remembered what Gu Peiji had said to him during the day. Lin Zian looked at me impatiently and said sharply, "Don't think you are really innocent. Also, why are you holding that dead rabbit? It's really unlucky. Nobody cares. It's just a silly rabbit." I hugged it tightly, and with tears in my eyes, I threw stones at Lin Zian with all my strength, almost accusing him and shouting, "You are a bad guy. Give me back my rabbit. That's my rabbit. How dare you kill it? Give it back to me." Lin Zian's face suddenly changed. He stood up abruptly and walked towards me quickly. I was so frightened that I held the dead rabbit tightly in my arms and ran away frantically from him. But he still couldn't escape Lin Zian. He pressed my shoulder and said, "Don't make trouble anymore. I'll buy you another one. It's just a rabbit." "Is it just a rabbit?" I couldn't help but slap him, holding back my tears and angrily retorting, "You are not my brother. My brother is the best man in the world. He must recognize my rabbit. You are lying. Give me back my rabbit." Lin Zian turned his head in surprise and was stunned for a long time after hearing these words. This time there was no one to interrupt me, and he immediately noticed that something was wrong with me because of the familiarity we had gained over more than 10 years of interaction. His silly sister would probably hug the rabbit and sob quietly, asking him why. In the end, everything will be fine after he coaxes her. No matter how wronged I feel, I will never deny my relationship with him. Lin Zian frowned, but couldn't help but trembled. "Awan, let's not make trouble anymore. Brother will compensate you. Can you call me brother again?" It's a lie. Awan doesn't remember him at all. I didn't listen to him and kicked him hard on the leg to avenge my rabbit. Lin Zian finally realized something and his face turned pale. "Wan Wan." He held my face in his hands and finally broke down and asked, "Wan Wan, it's my brother. The one who once took you on horseback rides across the plains and protected you for the rest of your life. Why are you hiding from me? Are you afraid of me?" Don't you remember me? How could you? Every word is out of order, and every sentence is questionable. I couldn't struggle, so I could only look up at him, purse my lips, and remain silent. Suddenly, warm tears flowed into his palms. Lin Zian was stunned for a moment, then came to his senses and tried to coax me in a hurry. Don't cry, Wan Wan, I'll take you to eat sweet-scented osmanthus cake. I'll never be mean to you again, and I won't wrong you. I held the rabbit covered in blood and went from being silent to sobbing until I finally burst into tears while clutching the hem of my clothes. And Lin Zian just looked at me with despair and red eyes under the moonlight. What are you feeling wronged about? How could something you cherish so dearly be destroyed so easily just by a single sentence? Or is it because of one stupidity that one can be sacrificed and betrayed without any consideration of the consequences? But Awan is a little fool who doesn't understand anything and doesn't know why. Who should be blamed? I just cried my heart out, and was extremely sad. Holding his rabbit, he wailed over and over again. Awan has no more rabbits. Awan has no more rabbits. 14. I seem to have forgotten a lot of things. The man in the mansion who looked 70% like me always claimed to be my brother and often came to me with all kinds of delicious and fun things. Like Gu Peiji, he often had wet eyes. Awan used to love eating candied haws. When it snows heavily, I'll take you out to make a snowman, okay? You still don't remember? Lin Zian tried to touch my cuffs with his fingertips. I looked at him in horror and took a step back, then another. Lin Zian was stunned for a moment, then hurried to catch up, whimpering on the spot like an abandoned puppy. Occasionally, when I doze off, a hot body will cover me from behind. Song Hanyi's face was full of pain. Wan Wan, I am your little husband. You said before that you would not leave me. You can't go back on your word. I don't believe that you won't like me after all you've done. We are already husband and wife. I suddenly interrupted him and asked in confusion. But everyone in Beijing knows that you didn't finish the ceremony with me that day, nor did you enter the bridal chamber with me. Are you still considered a couple? Song Hanyi couldn't bring up that dirty night again. His body was stiff for a while, and finally he buried his head in my neck, and warm liquid slid over it. I am so sleepy that I have no way to avoid it, and I am extremely annoyed. The one who cries the most stays by my side day and night, saying over and over again, in the past, Awan accompanied me, and now I follow behind Wan Wan. But I don't need you. Gu Peiji's usually straight back slumped down, his lips trembled, and tears fell from his eyes drop by drop. His eyes were broken, almost desperate. They seemed to have lost interest in my sister and turned to me to ask for my forgiveness. I don't even know them. How can I talk about forgiveness? They still didn't get tired of it, and often while coaxing me, they would blame each other in front of me. I could only watch them vigilantly, and every time they tried to escape, they were immediately caught. They said I just forgot. I think that people who can be forgotten are probably not important people. I suddenly looked up and saw a bird outside the courtyard wall, perched on a branch, flapping its wings and suddenly flying into the sky. I pursed my lips and suddenly said with some anticipation, I want to go out. I knelt at the entrance of the temple in the heavy snow, and the monk lowered his eyes indifferently. It's not just about how to get my sister back. He sighed compassionately. You originally had a great opportunity, but unfortunately your luck was taken away by someone else. If you have nowhere to go in the future, please come to me. He wants to take me on a journey. Be a free bird in the sky, without being bothered by the noise of human gossip. Awan must have been naughty, causing a stir in the whole city and making everyone dislike me. Then you should run away far away and never come back. It's enough for them to have sister, isn't it? But to my surprise, the three people who were arguing in the last second said 2 words in unison. No. Since that day, I have tried every way to escape from here, but I was kidnapped and brought back every time. They were heartbroken, and their eyes were bloodshot. Awan, why don't you stay here and let us protect you? You will be in danger if you go out. We are doing this for your own good. After that, he locked me in the house. Awan cannot decide her own life. It has always been like this, from the beginning to the end. But I always feel that this is not right. until my sister secretly gave me an idea. When someone found me on a sunny afternoon, the blood from my wrist had already flowed to the door. I lay on the bed holding the porcelain piece, my face pale, my eyes tightly closed, and I didn't know whether I was alive or dead. 15. 1-1. Someone called me heartbreakingly, but I couldn't tell whether it was Gu Peiji or Song Hanyi. Lin Zian seemed to have lost all his strength. He staggered to his knees beside my body and vomited a mouthful of blood. My parents suddenly screamed and hugged me, breaking down and crying. But I can hardly hear the voices of people around me. All the things that happened in the past passed by my eyes like a passing show. That should have been my life. My brother found the most beautiful brocade for me to make my wedding dress. He said with a young spirit, "If Song Hanyi bullies you in the future, you can come to me and let me vent your anger for you." Gu Peiji stood beside him. "If Wanwan feels wronged, tell me at any time and I will take you home." In the bridal chamber, Song Hanyi lifted my red veil and leaned over gently. From then on, the rest of my life was smooth and happy. But unfortunately, due to some strange combination of circumstances, everything went wrong. Suddenly, the clear sound of chanting accompanied by Buddhist chanting shattered the illusion, like a spring breeze and rain, coming towards me in strands. A senior monk kicked off his robe and walked into the palace, sighing Amitabha. I have a connection with this donor. It is the most difficult to understand the fate. I have asked His Majesty to take her away for salvation. The eminent monks of the National Temple were not afraid of power and remained unmoved despite the emperor's repeated requests. Nowadays, going down the mountain for someone is a supreme honor. No one will refuse, and no one dares to refuse. All living beings are suffering, but fortunately the Bodhisattva lowered his eyes, sighed softly, and finally looked at me with favor. No matter how reluctant they had no choice but to let him take me away. The monk suddenly turned his eyes and glanced at my sister indifferently. Linny suddenly covered his head, screamed in pain, and rolled to the ground in the crowd. She screamed in fear, saying something that no one could understand. "You stinky monk, what have I done wrong? In the 3,000 worlds, I took away their opportunities, so they deserve it. They are all green tea and white lotus. It is only natural that I make them hated by everyone. Why do you want to erase my system?" After a while, she passed out. He turned around, and the people behind him just stared at me, getting farther and farther away. Later, Lin Zian rode his horse all day long in the mountains looking for his sister. He found a house full of my favorite things and often cried bitterly in the middle of the night. Gu Peiji never married. He spent his days drinking and caressing a portrait of a woman. He died of illness in his home a few years later. Song Hanyi went completely crazy and tried every possible means to find me. He became half human, half ghost, and became a laughingstock in the capital. Without the system, Lin Wan no longer had the medium to seize the protagonist's luck, nor did she have the memory of her that she had previously forced into the three people's minds. Without the blessing of the heroine's luck, everyone's good impression of her plummeted. Whatever she did to me in the past, I took revenge on her. She was tortured by the three men, thrown into a group of beggars and abused all night, and then skinned alive until she went completely insane. She screamed in a dark corner, "I am the heroine. They all deserve to die." In the end, Ajay died tragically in a corner where no one knew about it, and no one even came to collect her body. From now on, the mountains are high and the road is long. There is a silly little girl beside the enlightened monk. She is as pure as water as she was at the beginning, looking up at the beautiful mountains and rivers. After the winter snow, no matter what the road ahead holds, spring will be bright and your journey will never end.